We've all got them, right? Those little rituals for good luck, knocking on wood, maybe carrying a special coin. But what if that little bit of luck was the only thing standing between you and the absolute unthinkable?
I mean, what if we're not talking about passing a test or catching a flight? What if we're talking about surviving the next 5 minutes? That's exactly what we're going to get into today. The huge, terrifying, and sometimes just tragic power of a simple lucky charm.
All right, so let's jump right in. Our story actually starts way back in 1921 with a piece of fiction and probably the most famous good luck symbol you can think of, the rabbit's foot. In this particular story, a character calls it the royal rabbit foot, the one thing that brings all the good fortune to the entire plantation. So, this tale comes from a collection by an author named E.K. Means, and let me tell you, it is just pure chaos. The entire plot, everything that happens, is driven by this rock solid belief that this one little rabbit's foot holds some kind of unbelievable power. A belief so strong, it basically throws a whole town into a total tailspin. I mean, just look at the mayhem this one little thing unleashes. First, it gets stolen, which kicks off this whole chain reaction of mishaps. Then, losing it somehow causes a massive stampede of livestock right down the main street. The foot gets lost, then stolen back, and you can't make this up, it gets swallowed by an alligator. Of course, it's eventually recovered, messily. But here's the crazy part. Through all of that, the characters seem totally protected by the foot's luck, and they survive every single thing that comes their way.
But here's the thing to remember. For all that chaos, nobody is ever in any real danger. The rabbit's foot, it's really just a plot device. It's the engine for a funny, wild adventure. It's all about getting into a bit of trouble, not staring tragedy in the face. And this is where our story takes a really sharp turn. We're about to leave that world of fiction behind, because we're entering a world where luck isn't about finding a lost charm. It's about hoping you don't need to be found on a battlefield. Yeah, because when you're in the trenches of World War I or the deserts of Afghanistan, a lucky charm, it's not some fun accessory for an adventure. No, for a soldier, it's a desperate, last-ditch shield against the absolute randomness of war. In this comparison right here, it just perfectly shows the massive, terrifying gap between these two worlds. On one hand, you've got funny little mishaps, and on the other, the brutal, stark reality of survival. The belief in the charm might be the same, but the stakes, they couldn't be any higher. Okay, listen to this. Take the incredible story of Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Bent. It's December 1914, he's on the Western Front, and he gets hit by a shell. He's terribly wounded, and he lies there, exposed in the freezing mud of no man's land for 18 hours. That he survived it all was described as, well, nothing short of a miracle. And you know what he credited for his survival? This. A silver cigarette case. It was completely mangled, twisted, by the very same blast that almost killed him. Now, obviously, it didn't stop him from getting hurt, but for him, it was proof. It was the physical proof of the luck that kept him alive through something that by all accounts should have been fatal. But for every story of a miracle like that, there's another one that's a really sobering reminder that luck is fragile. And that brings us to a much more recent conflict and the story of a soldier named Lance Corporal D'Amatos in Afghanistan. So D'Amatos had one of the most dangerous jobs you can possibly imagine. He was an explosive device searcher. And his lucky charm? It was just a simple wristband with his girlfriend's name, Sophie, on it. One day, his luck was tested in the most extreme way possible. He walked right over 2 IEDs. 2 of them. And neither one detonated. He actually said later, "I was counting my lucky stars then. I had someone on my shoulder." But later on, those same IEDs did go off. One of them damaged a vehicle. The other one killed his friend Corporal David Barnsdale. D'Amatos's luck held. His friends didn't. It's just a heartbreaking, brutal example of how completely random it all is. And this just forces you to ask the question, why? Why do we put so much faith in these little objects, especially when we see their limits so clearly? Well, the answer seems to be buried in the psychology of trying to survive something that feels, well, unsurvivable. A lot of soldiers, to cope with it all, adopt this mindset called fatalism. It's typically the belief that, hey, if you're going to get hit, you're going to get hit. That there's a bullet out there with your name on it, and that's just the way it is. It's a way to kind of manage that constant, overwhelming stress.
So, a lucky charm is almost like a rebellion against that idea. It becomes a psychological tool. It's a way of saying, okay, maybe there is a bullet with my name on it, but maybe, just maybe, this little thing right here can make it miss. It gives you a feeling of control, some sense of agency, in a situation that is completely, fundamentally out of your control.
Listen to this quote from Warrant Officer Carl Laney, an explosive disposal expert, of all people. It just says it all. His lucky charm was a foot-long piece of rope he'd used to pull bombs out of the ground. He totally admits it sounds ridiculous, but he also says his dependency on it was ridiculous, as in it was very, very real. It wasn't some magic rope, you see. It was his psychological anchor. Which kind of brings us full circle, back to where we started. We've gone all the way from a pretty funny, chaotic adventure with a rabbit's foot to the absolute grim reality of the battlefield. So after all that, what have we really learned about the power that's at play here? I mean, just look at the contrast. The objects themselves, they're so ordinary, right? A piece of an animal, a little metal box, a plastic wristband, a bit of rope. They don't have any power on their own. The real power, that comes from what we pour into them. It's our conviction, our hope, that feeling of connection, the comfort they provide. So whether it's getting you out of a scrape in some make-believe town or helping you get through just one more day in a war zone, that lucky charm is serving the exact same human need. It's a vessel for hope. So at the end of the day, the real question isn't whether the rabbit's foot actually works. The real question is, why do we need so desperately to believe that it does?